NBA executives have never seen this before. That's right. They've never seen an offseason this bad before. We're going to be talking about the Chicago Bulls and if they had, in fact, the worst offseason of everybody in the NBA. So we're going to be talking about the Alex Caruso deal, the DeMar DeRozan deal, and the Josh Giddey acquisition. And as usual, this is another episode of Bulls Digest, and I'm your host, Rico Greenhowe. Before we jump into it, want to let you know that 75% of you that watch the videos are not subscribed to the channel. Make sure that you mash that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with the latest news and happenings around your Chicago Bulls. And it would mean the world to us as we try to reach 5,000 subscribers before the NBA season starts. All right, so we're going to be breaking down an article which is actually deemed the Chicago Bulls having the second worst off season of everybody in the NBA. And so we're going to look at that list, and we're also going to be looking at basically the trades and the acquisitions that the Chicago Bulls had. And so you can find this article pretty much everywhere, and essentially what it is that there were 18 different NBA league members, which you had coaches, scouts, executives, and they all weighed in on everybody this offseason and the moves and everything else. And the Chicago Bulls were number 2 on this list. And so we have the Nuggets at first, the Bulls second, the Clippers, the Lakers, Knicks, and the Pistons. All right, so starting with the Nuggets, all right, and so they're saying that the Nuggets essentially are on this list mainly because they didn't really maximize Murray, and the Joker thought that they should have made some more moves this offseason, even though that they did go out here and they got Russell Westbrook to come off the bench, which I think that's a pretty good move, especially since, if Murray does go down, I think you do need another point guard that can step in and perhaps help them out. So I definitely think that was pretty good. I think that, probably they could have gone out there and gotten some more players for their bench. I could understand that, but I'm not sure if I'm really willing to go ahead and give them the worst offseason of everybody in the NBA. Bringing that list back to the Clippers, I would say that they would be up there because the Clippers lost Paul George for nothing, and essentially they really replaced him with Derrick Jones coming over. So that's really what it comes down to. Derrick Jones came over in replacement for Paul George. And the Lakers, they didn't have a lot of cap room in the first place to really do anything. The Knicks, I think that they did something this offseason, and the Pistons, they got Tobias Harris. All right. So now going into the Chicago Bulls and why we were deemed second. And I think they make some great points. All right. So they're talking about the Alex Caruso deal, number 1. And they're saying with the Alex Caruso deal, we did not get any picks back, which I absolutely agree with this. I think that, it was rumored that Caruso it was floated out there in trade offers that could have netted the Chicago Bulls potentially a protected first round pick, which I think that probably really irked fans to hear that. All right, then we eventually do move him for Josh Giddey. And even though OKC was really selling him low, we still should have gotten draft capital back from OKC, who I think has some of the best draft capital in all the NBA. So the fact that we didn't at least get a second round pick out of this situation, I think that's tough to come over with Josh Giddey. But what's even more interesting is that was not the deal that these executives thought was the worst. They thought that the DeMar DeRozan deal was the worst, which was interesting to me. I understand it a little bit because they're saying, look, the Chicago Bulls, if they were going to do a sign and trade with DeMar DeRozan or trade him in general, they really should have traded him when they had leverage. And I understand that, and I'm not saying that the Chicago Bulls do things logically, right? If they were going to trade DeMar DeRozan, yes, they should have done it probably at the trade deadline, just like they probably should have traded Andre Drummond at the trade deadline as well, because it was rumored that there was some draft capital out there for him as well. But when you listen to the comments in that ESPN article and you've been listening to what AK and these guys have been saying out in Vegas, they keep saying that they owed it to this group one more time to run it back. And even that's interesting to me and a head scratcher. And not to go off into like a tangent, but if you were looking to trade Zach LaVine, he was part of that group. So I'm not sure how committed the Chicago Bulls were to this group. But yes, if you were going to go ahead and shake it up and you knew that you were essentially not going to have DeMar DeRozan in a winning situation, which is what I think it came down to, then yes, ultimately the Chicago Bulls should have gone out and then made some trades with Drummond, with Caruso, with DeRozan, and got some more draft capital back, which they didn't do, again, because they said that, hey, they wanted to hold on and see what they could do with this unit, all right? And so another thing that this article really brings up is it talks about the fact that it feels like really another thing that had them vote for Chicago having the worst second worst offseason was the fact that when you look at this Caruso deal, you look at the DeRozan deal, they said that when San Antonio got the best asset with a 2031 pick swap from the Kings in that DeRozan deal, that's why they feel like that DeRozan deal really, that was the worst offseason move for the Chicago Bulls because of that, all right? Because of that pick swap, and they felt like the San Antonio Spurs really won in that particular deal more so than, the Bulls or the Kings here. And so, I think it's an interesting point. I would say that the Chicago Bulls really, they didn't have a great offseason, to say the least. I think that for me personally, the first thing that they should have did was they should have moved on from Zach LaVine. All right. I think that was like the most obvious situation. And we can debate on why Zach LaVine is still on the roster or whatnot, but however you feel, regardless if you're with Zach LaVine or you're with the organization, I think that a lot of us that are watching what's going on, we're reading what's going on, I think we can all agree that, this is a relationship that I think has ran its course with Zach LaVine and the Chicago Bulls. And I just think that it would be better served for both to part ways. All right. And so you hope that Chicago just doesn't part ways and attach assets to do so, although it may look that way. But I think that really is what makes the Chicago Bulls offseason tough, because they did not move on from Zach LaVine. Now you have younger players that we see could maybe play right now, like a Modest Buzelis. Patrick Williams, I think, is going to look to take more of a bigger role if he's healthy or whatnot. We have Jalen Smith. We've got some players that we want to give them some playing time, right? We might have to have Dosunmu come off the bench. And as long as LaVine and Vooch and Lonzo are on the roster, they're kind of in the way of the bigger picture. And so I think that that's probably what makes the Chicago Bulls offseason the worst, because they're setting their future up really poorly, because these players are in the way of these players getting some run, getting better, and us developing this franchise moving forward. So I think that that's probably one of the toughest blows in the offseason. With the DeMar DeRozan situation, I'm just glad that he came back to us and we got some picks out of the deal. He didn't have to do that. The Chicago Bulls didn't have to do that. They really could have lost. And that just shows you how amazing I think DeMar DeRozan is. Yes, he needed to get this deal done so he could get paid. But it helped us out to where we got some draft capital back, because we absolutely fumbled in not doing something at the trade deadline. So let me know in the comments, do you guys think that the Chicago Bulls had the worst offseason? Do you feel that they did have the second worst offseason? Do you feel like they shouldn't be on the list? Or do you feel like, look, they should include not trading Zach LaVine on this list? Let me know in the comments what you're thinking. And even though it is pretty evident that we had one of the worst off seasons, I'm still saying go Bulls, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.